The Bolivian Workers' Center has suspended a general strike and roadblocks in different regions of the country. Several European countries are adopting measures in the face of a surge in coronavirus cases. Moroccan authorities have reimposed lockdown restrictions in the city of Tangier following a recent spike in COVID-19 cases. From the headquarters of Telesur English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South, and I'm Katrina Goss. We begin in Bolivia, where the Workers' Center, together with social movements, has suspended the general strike and roadblocks in different regions of the country, following the signing of a law to prevent a further postponement of the general elections. Bolivia has seen widespread protests for almost 2 weeks, following the postponement of the general elections from September to October 18th. On Thursday, following pressure from the protesters and lawmakers of the movement towards socialism, the de facto regime agreed to sign into law the guarantees against further delays to the elections. In an interview with Telesur, the leader of the Bolivian Workers' Center, the chief trade union federation of the country, stressed that workers and social movements will continue fighting to strengthen Bolivian democracy. The union leader also noted that the decision was made to avoid further violent confrontations in the country and announced the recent terrorist attacks against offices of the federation.
Now the instruction is for all our mobilized comrades to take a fourth break in the actions, a fourth intermission, while in permanent vigil until the general elections of October 18, to ensure that the general elections are held and also to ensure that the people can exercise their democratic right to elect their next government for the coming 5 years. As of today, we declare ourselves in permanent vigil and a fourth halt to the mobilizations to follow this situation, because here the fight does not end. The fight has begun little by little. First, the fight has been against the pandemic for our people's health and life. Then it has become the fight for the basic needs of education, work, and against a host of layoffs. These have been the main demands of the people.
Venezuela's Attorney General Tarek William Saab has announced that the captured U.S. citizens involved in the attempted mercenary invasion known as Operation Gideon were sentenced to 20 years in prison.
On August 7, 2020, the first preliminary hearing was held before the Fourth Court of Control, with powers over crimes related to terrorism, with national jurisdiction. In this first hearing, the U.S. citizens, freely and without coercion, admitted their involvement in the actions.
And the Venezuelan Attorney General announced that the captured U.S. citizens admitted their guilt.
The hearings held on August 2nd, in which the 17 people involved in the mercenary attacks, known as Gideon, admitted their involvement in the crimes of which they were accused. It is important to highlight that they admitted their guilt. That is to say, they have confessed and were convicted.
This Friday, President of Argentina, Alberto Fernandez, offered details on actions taken to stop the spread of COVID-19 and strengthen the national health system.
The first important achievement was the strengthening of the health system. To my left is Axel, governor of Buenos Aires provinces. If we had not worked with Axel the way we did, today, Buenos Aires' health system would have collapsed, especially the metropolitan area of Buenos Aires. We have doubled the number of beds in the ICU, and even more in other areas over this period.
And the Argentinian president noted that commercial activities have continued while observing biosafety measures.
Little by little, we resume activities, and we open stores and we open industries with health protocols. All of this has functioned wonderfully well. It must be said, in the industries that have reopened and that have followed the health protocols, there have not been any infections. In the businesses that have reopened, the health protocols have been followed, and there have not been any cases.
Mexican authorities have announced that the border with the United States will remain closed to non-essential travel following a steady increase in COVID-19 cases in both countries. The border closure will now extend to September. Authorities noted that the decision implies an important economic impact, but was being taken in order to protect public health. Mexico reported over 7,300 new COVID-19 cases in the last 24 hours, taking the total number to more than 500,000. Meanwhile, the death toll stands at over 55,000. Cuban Director of Epidemiology, Dr. Francisco Duran, offered an update on COVID-19 cases this Friday.
After the processing and analysis of these samples, 56 people were diagnosed positive for COVID-19 in our country yesterday. And with this situation, Cuba accumulates 319,440 samples, of which 3,229 people, 1.01%, tested positive for COVID-19.
And Dr. Francisco Duran also noted that there were no new COVID-19 deaths registered over the past 24 hours.
592 cases remain active, which represents 18.3%, while presenting a stable clinical condition. With the reports we have previously informed, we maintain 88 fatalities. We always mention 2 evacuated cases. 22 patients were discharged yesterday.
And we'll be right back after this short break, so don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. Spain announced the closure of nightclubs and banned smoking on the street without social distancing as part of a reinforcement of restrictions to slow the spread of the coronavirus. The Spanish health minister announced that the new measures will be enforced nationwide as the country battles a surge in infections, with nearly 3,000 new cases reported on Thursday. Restaurants and bars will be required to close by 1 a.m, with no new customers allowed in after midnight. Regional authorities will be required to carry out testing among groups of the population that are particularly at risk and in the areas most affected.
I also want to make it clear that what we are going through now is not what it was in March or April. In terms of pressure on the hospitals, the situation is totally different. Now we cannot allow for there to be an increase in cases, and therefore we take these measures today in coordination with the autonomous regions that will be applied throughout Spain, in addition to the measures taken by each autonomous communities according to the pandemic's specific characteristics in the region. This will allow us, in our judgment, to stabilize the cases and reduce them.
And despite Italy imposing mandatory coronavirus testing for all travellers arriving from Croatia, Greece, Malta and Spain, people at Malpensa Airport in Milan are not being tested for COVID-19. Travellers claim there was little information offered at the airport on arrival. Italian authorities had announced that travellers arriving at an airport, port or border crossing would be able to choose from a number of options, including rapid tests on the spot or the presentation of a certificate obtained within the last 72 hours showing they were COVID-19 free. British holidaymakers faced a scramble to get home on Friday after the UK government said it would reimpose a 14-day quarantine for travellers from France and the Netherlands. The move prompted French authorities to quickly announce a reciprocal measure. The UK government announced the measure would apply from 4 a.m. local time on Saturday. A mass exodus of the estimated 160,000 British holidaymakers currently in France was expected. France has seen a surge in coronavirus cases, reporting almost 3,000 new cases on Friday, the highest daily figure since May. The United Kingdom had no quarantine measures in place for months, but in June imposed a blanket self-isolation requirement on all people arriving from abroad, which has since been adjusted according to the supposed risk posed by each country. Bulgaria's Prime Minister offered to step down this Friday if legislators approve his plans for the election of a Grand National Assembly to push through constitutional amendments. Prime Minister Boyko Borisov said he would quit on the same day that Parliament approved the move, which is seen as an attempt to appease protesters who've been demanding that the government and the chief prosecutor resign. Protesters have pointed to the erosion of state institutions to serve the interests of private business and announced a failure to bring any corrupt high-level officials to account. The PM proposed measures to make the work of Parliament more efficient by halving the number of lawmakers and imposing stricter accountability on the chief prosecutor.
It's time for a restart. It's time for wise decisions. Pursuant to Article 87, Paragraph 1 of the Constitution of the Republic of Bulgaria, and Article 76, Paragraph 1 of the Rules for the Organization and Activity of the National Assembly, political party GERB will submit a draft of a new Constitution of the Republic of Bulgaria. It is time for responsibility and determination. It's time to change, and not only the political system, and to restart the state. The need of restarting the political model can no longer be postponed.
And we have more stories coming up after this final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. Moroccan authorities have reimposed lockdown restrictions in the city of Tangier following a recent spike in confirmed COVID-19 cases. Restrictions on travel to and from another 8 Moroccan cities have been imposed, while several neighbourhoods in Tangier are on a localised lockdown. Meanwhile, borders have been reopened only to Moroccan residents returning from abroad, while a mandatory quarantine must be conducted by those entering the country. Moroccan health authorities have reported over 37,000 COVID-19 cases and a death toll of 584 since the outbreak of the pandemic.
We live in Tangier, and the situation is delicate and difficult because of the pandemic, and many cases have been recorded. We are in the first or second line at the national level, and we register a lot of cases every day. It is not normal to see this reinforced military and police presence in the city of Tangier, and in particular to see armored vehicles and police dispatchers at the entrance to our neighborhoods. But Tangier is a lively and dynamic city.
The streets of Gaza City saw protests this Friday against the deal reached between Israel and the United Arab Emirates to normalise their ties. Palestinians have stressed that the move is a betrayal of Palestine and the struggle to end the Israeli occupation.
We came today as a Palestinian people with its masses and leaders to tell the rulers of the Emirates that all your shares are not worth a grain of dirt from the land of Palestine. All your money, all your billions, and all your oil are not equal to a drop of blood that fell from a Palestinian child. The Emirati Zionist agreement means standing next to the occupation, adopting the enemy's occupying and criminal policies, and a flagrant violation of our historical rights and our national principles.
And Palestinians in the West Bank also expressed their rejection of the deal between Israel and the United Arab Emirates, noting it betrays the Palestinian cause.
What happened yesterday between the United Arab Emirates and Israel is Arab lethargy, just in order to bury the Palestinian cause. And of course, Israel is trying to earn the Arab countries through normalization in order to make them forget the Palestinian cause. The picture that appeared on the screens yesterday, the United Arab Emirates flag on the Tel Aviv municipality building and the Israeli flag on the Khalifa Tower, this is the biggest insult from a brother to us as Palestinians, with our different affiliations, and after this we will see more, not only from the United Arab Emirates but from other Arab nations.
And Iranian Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif has condemned the deal between the United Arab Emirates and Israel, while highlighting that the US administration does not understand the region.
It is true that the European countries have announced a number of initiatives, but unfortunately the current American administration has proved that it is unable to understand the political aspects in our region. They, the Americans, do not understand the reality of the Palestinian situation in occupied Palestine, and they believe that through the fabricated played United Arab Emirates and Israel agreement that they did unfortunately yesterday, they can determine the fate of Palestine.
The United Nations Refugee Agency has mobilized $12 million for its emergency response for vulnerable families following the blast in Beirut.
UNHCR's priorities are to provide assistance with relief efforts, provide shelters kits including mattresses and pillows, and shelter kits such as wood and plastic sheeting. This will provide the minimal level of assistance to victim houses and flats to ensure the necessary protection.
Protests continued in Belarus this Friday following the re-election of President Alexander Lukashenko. The authorities have announced the existence of a Western plan to interfere in the country's internal affairs on supporting violent opposition sectors to destabilize the nation. President Lukashenko has described the protests as illegal, which started following the announcement of the election results. Police have made an unspecified number of arrests, as well as deployments aimed at preserving public safety. And the president of Belarus, Alexander Lukashenko, has stressed that he remains in the country and continues to carry out his duties.
First of all, I'm still alive and I haven't gone abroad as some respected media are hyping. The president has left the country and is abroad. Is today the 14th? The 14th, and we are meeting to discuss the work of construction industry.
The Turkish government declared that it plans to continue studies in the Mediterranean Sea as part of its energy exploration moves. Authorities announced that the research ship it deployed to the area at the beginning of the week would continue studies in the eastern Mediterranean Sea until August 23rd. The move has led to heightened tensions with neighbouring Greece, which considers the area part of its exclusive economic zone. Athens activated the alert level and deployed its naval forces to monitor Turkey's movements in the region. On Friday, the Turkish Foreign Minister warned that his country would respond to any hostile action against the vessel. Kenyan health authorities confirmed 588 new COVID-19 cases on Friday, while the capital, Nairobi, is the hardest-hit city in the country.
580 people who have tested positive for the virus from a total sample of 5,458, all tested within the last 24 hours. This brings now to total the number of positive cases in the country to 29,334. From our cases today, 530 are Kenyans, whereas 50 are foreigners. 336 of them are male, while 244 of them are female.
And we've come to the end of this news brief, but we finish with a video of the famous Cuban cartoon, El Pidio Valdés, as this Friday marks the 50th anniversary of the creation of the popular cartoon character who embodied the Cuban struggle for independence from Spanish colonialism. Remember, you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net, and you can also join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and YouTube. For Telesur English, I'm Katrina Goss, and thank you for watching.
Acompañamos a los pueblos que